Okay, we ready to call to order?
Mm-hmm.
It is 6:13. Ooh, do we have any citizen comments? It's so interesting being on this side.
I didn't receive any in email.
Okay.
JP, but if there's anybody here that wanted to chime in.
I do see Matt's here.
I am. Just want to say hi. And this is my first equity meeting, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to watch from here on out.
Hi, Matt.
Hi.
Hello, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
We need to do roll call.
Okay. How do I go about? Do I just say who's here?
I think
Okay,
Aiden can say who's here in the notes. She knows everybody. She's got everybody's name, so you don't need to do that. We can go to the first item on the agenda.
First item? Okay. Did you all get copies of the minutes? Did that go out from the last
I
meeting?
didn't see it, no.
Since we weren't doing the Open Meetings Act, do we have to approve those minutes?
We should.
We should.
But we can do it at the next meeting too, right?
Okay. Yeah, and we can add the minutes previous to where they will be from here on out accessible to the public, or the public meeting minutes could start as of tonight. So
Okay.
And yeah, I don't think I got them either, but I was double checking just now.
So do I move to table that?
I don't think you have to do that. I think,
No?
oh, that's the first item on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion then to table the approval of the minutes until the next meeting.
And Debbie, we should announce ourselves when we make motions.
Okay, Ron, I'll make a motion to table the approval of the minutes until the next meeting.
I'll
Second.
So now you call for the vote.
All right, so I call for the vote.
And it has to be, you have to call names now.
And Aiden can do that as note taker.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
So Aiden, just say our full name and then we'll say yes or no.
Okay, and then do I write that in the notes as well?
Yes.
Who says yay and nay?
Mhm.
It's my first time doing
You're
this.
doing great.
Very intense. All right. So Natalie, Sally.
And Aiden, you might want to go alphabetically just so that you know who you've done and who you haven't, and that way it's easy in the future too, because you'll just remember the pattern of alphabetical names. Not that you have to do it that way.
There's
right
only
now.
6 people. I think she
I was gonna say, for right now, I'm just gonna go down the list that I just typed, because then I can copy and paste it and put it in. So Natalie, I'm gonna start with you.
Yes. Natalie Salee. Yes.
So Lee, is that how you pronounce it? Okay.
And actually, I'm sorry to interrupt. We don't have to roll call vote the tabling. We can all just agree to that. We actually just established that by practice in our board meeting. Unless there's somebody who has an issue with it, I think we can move forward with tabling, and we don't have to roll call vote that. Debbie, didn't that just take
I
place?
didn't remember it, but my mind don't go by my memory.
Even though there was 2 motions, a motion and a second, you don't have to roll call that?
We didn't when we decided to table things in the previous meeting. Obviously, any votes where we're actually taking action, we would roll call those, but we don't even need a motion and a second just to table something. We can all decide that we're just moving forward.
Okay.
If we want to get in the habit, and if you want the practice idea.
No, let's just go.
Okay.
Okay, let's do it. Tabled. Yay.
I also moved to table the equity lens since Pat isn't able to join us. Are you all okay with that too?
Okay, yeah, we can kind of raise hands so we all have the visual of agreement on tabling that. Okay.
All right, so let's move into meeting Kyron. So if he can go on about his evening instead of watching us try to figure this all out.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, my name is Kyron Saxton, from Wilmington, North Carolina. I moved here August 2017 to pursue a degree in community psychology. So I'm happy to be here. This is like a perfect fit, and I'm ready to get to work.
Yay.
Welcome.
Is it okay if I say a couple quick things about Kyron? Okay, so Kyron had originally interviewed with us for our accounts manager position, and he has lots of experience in marketing and outreach and community development. So I asked him if he would consider letting me just bring him right on board for our marketing and outreach assistant position role. And gratefully and luckily for me, he agreed. So he and I will be working very closely together. I wanted him to come here tonight just to meet everybody on the REDI committee. He and I talked a little bit earlier this morning, and I let him know that Pat wouldn't be here, but who Dr. Effiam is, and that we had hired her as a consultant. He and I are going to get more into the nitty gritty about what is Ridgeville Park District, who are we, what do we do, and kind of catch him up to speed on all things Ridgeville starting next week. So I'm glad that he's here at this meeting so he can get an idea of what kind of equity work that we're working on and talking about and prioritizing. And when we get into it, he's going to be really pivotal in helping me continue to nurture relationships that already exist with partner organizations, and also develop more and really kind of hone in on the equity lens and establishing a nice outreach pattern for us. I've talked to him about the equity page on our website. He's also going to help me develop content for that page. He's been doing lots of research. So really excited to have him here. And thanks, Kyron.
Well,
You're welcome.
So am I correct in assuming that the stuff that I sent to you now will eventually go to Kyron to get posted?
Yes. So eventually, when we're talking about content for the website and different opportunities related to equity, you'll be sending it to me and Kyron, and we'll be developing content to add to the site.
Okay, awesome. Happy to have you.
Thank you.
Yay.
And Natalie, if we want to reach out to Kyron, should we do that through you, or does he have like a Ridgeville email set up and we should connect with him directly, or how do you want to do that?
You can, I will send everybody an email tonight with him copied on it. We are at our max capacity of Ridgeville email addresses. So unfortunately I can't offer him that at this time, but he has an email address, and I will make sure that everybody has it in case you need to talk to him.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, next item on the agenda is how we will know we have become an equitable organization. This is a question that Dr. Effiam had posted to us towards the end of the summer that we've been kind of thinking about. And so I figured even before we get to the equity lens, I figured we can kind of brainstorm a little bit and talk about what kind of things we think we would see moving forward, with some of the changes that we know Dr. Effiam is recommending that we make. Debbie.
okay, I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've talked to Dr. Effiam, and I think the way that I see it, as we'll know, is when we have the equity lens, which is a set of, rules or things that you go by. It's not just, willy-nilly. It's definitely a set of something that's an equity lens. And when we're able, with every hiring, with every, discussion of who we're going to buy playground equipment and everything from, when we're able to go down the list and say, check it off. Yes, we did that. Yes, that was, yes. Then I think, we are equitable organization. That's why the equity lens, set of rules is so important. That's how I understand it. I don't know if different people have different ideas about it.
I think that's great, Debbie. I think that's a really great point, in terms of just thinking about, are we an equitable organization, is prioritizing that equity lens in everything that we do. I think that's a great starting point. I also think for me, being an equitable organization looks like everybody has a seat at the table. I remember one of the workshops that I did with the YW, that conversation came up, and that was something that really stood out to me, was this idea that everybody, whether they're an elected commissioner, a staff, somebody on staff, or a patron, or just somebody who's in our parks, that they have a voice that they know can be heard, and they feel comfortable talking to us.
I add something, and also, based off of the community, or the society that whoever is requiring help or we're helping, once there is not a problem, or that community doesn't identify any whatever that subject was as a problem, then that is also how we know that we're equitable, because the community no longer has an issue, therefore it's solved. It's just more of a little actual sociology definition behind that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
I'd like to think that there is an aspirational aspect to it, and that we should recognize that this is a goal that it's a constant goal. We never reach it as such. We don't arrive. This is something that we constantly have to work toward and be striving to perfect continuously.
Great. Thank you, Elaine.
I was thinking on this, and I was kind of struggling with it myself, because it feels like a really big, important question. And so when I didn't feel like I had like a very clear answer, I felt like, is that a problem? Should I have a more clear answer to this right off the bat? And one of the things that occurred to me, two things. One is, when it comes to whether you are equitable or not, to me, it's so inherent in the definition of that, whether, how other people feel about us, not how we feel about ourselves. And I think that's in large part because when you're not considering equity, and when that isn't, deeply ingrained in every decision you make, every discussion you have, blah, 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 you don't necessarily know that that's the case, because the default is so many ways of not thinking of other people, not realizing how we affect other people, that kind of thing. And so that's just one element that occurred to me, is that I would want to sort of have our direct community be part of the answering of that question, based on how they see us acting, what they see us talking about, how they view us.
Oh, through continued surveys and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little silly, but I even had this vision of like how a lot of places, the YMCA included, good businesses also will have like a comment box, and we don't have to physically have that necessarily, but yeah, surveys, and also maybe just a periodic quarterly or biannually sort of process by which we check in with the community and allow for input.
I think we can get that at citizen comments at this meeting and our monthly board meetings.
I agree, for sure, because that's going to be sort of an organic and ongoing gauge of how people feel and what things are being said. But citizen comment is sort of like anyone who wants to can come, and sometimes nobody does. If we devise a more intentional, scheduled, method-based way to engage the community on a set of ongoing sort of goals, or this is what we're trying to do, how well are we doing it type thing. I think that could be really cool, because I don't want to sit here and just talk about how we feel about ourselves. I want to know how the community feels about the work we're doing.
We will. We definitely will.
And then the second thing I was gonna say was, Oh, that perhaps in an effort to further answer the question, and also in an ongoing sense, because I absolutely feel like it's a journey, it's a constant practice. I saw somebody on the internet call it a practice the other day. Things like anti-racism and being equitable. It's sort of like you get up in the morning, you have to set that intention. You have to think about it consciously and decide to do things differently than you have, think about things differently than you have thought about them. And yeah, you don't arrive. It's sort of like every day it's something that you're working on. Although certainly, like Kyron said, it's like on any one isolated incident that may happen that we have to address and sort of fix or deal with. That's a more sort of finite way of looking at equity, is that there will be issues that come up that we deal with and we fix, but then it's sort of like, okay, on to the next thing, and on to the rest of our sort of day-to-day stuff. So I was just thinking that, like, if we were to think either to ourselves, or we could discuss it about what signals a non-equitable institution or organization, it might help us sort of show the other side of that, in terms of, recognizing how not to be. Okay, what's the opposite of that, or what's the goal in that regard? And I don't necessarily have bullet points ready in there. It's just something that I was thinking about.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I brought up the equity lens, because I think that's where we need to start. And when people throw around now, are you looking at this through an equity lens? What are they talking about? Well, there is a set equity lens of, rules, not rules, but you know what I mean. And I think that would be a great place to start, to make sure that everything we deal with that set, and we can check it off.
I think that also has to do with like us being prepared, right? So like something happened, we had an incident a little over a year ago now that kind of got this whole thing rolling, right? And now here we are a year or so later, having, with a REDI committee, having open public meetings, which is great. So I think it's also by establishing with that equity lens, which, as Debbie said, is a document, is a lens that Pat is going to help us put together, that we can reference. And when we're putting things out to bid, when we're staffing, when we're tackling citizen concerns and whatnot, that also, it just helps us be prepared so that we're not blindsided or surprised by that issues that may arise, right? So when people come to us and say, I have a concern or a question that is in relation to equity, we know what to do, right? We know how to say, like, okay, thank you. And then we have a starting point to like really jump off on.
We have the language.
We have the language. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's also what an equitable institution looks like to me, is people who are prepared to like really tackle those conversations head on and like know what to do with that and what the work is, because the work never ends, right?
I really like what Martha said about finding a way, because I agree with you too, Debbie. I think, citizen comments is a great way for people to come and interact and share their views. But if we can develop, a more, like what Martha's saying, a more thoughtful way to engage, so that we can essentially kind of like, cast out a net and say, like, this is what we're working on. This is what we're hoping this is accomplishing. What's it looking like from the other end? I think that would be a really great way to engage the community and make sure that we're moving in a direction that the community needs us to move, and not just in a direction that we want to, as a committee or as, people who adore Ridgeville. I also, the other thing for me that I think is really important about, moving forward and really doing our best to be an equitable organization. And it's bits and pieces of what everybody else said, but this idea of, even that equity lens is going to have to be reactive is not the word that I'm looking for. It needs to be flexible, so that in 10 years, when equity needs look different, because like Kyron said, hopefully we've met some of those needs, that it can be adjusted, right? It's not this idea that like this equity lens is going to be like this is the end all be all, nothing in the world is ever going to change what this lens looks like. We need to make sure that we have this engagement with the community so we know when it's time to shift things to be more appropriate as time goes on, or as when we hopefully pass this off to the next generation of people who take this work on when more of my grays come in and all that.
So it's like a living document.
Exactly, exactly.
That's great.
I really like that idea because I think sometimes when we have sort of guiding documents for any organization, the park district, for instance, has bylaws, you know, and an ordinance that sort of comes from the state, and then we tailor it to our needs a little bit too. We don't really mean to, nobody means to, but when you have those kinds of like formal documents that outline what it is that you do or don't do and rules and stuff, and it becomes kind of stale over time, you know what I mean? And if you don't have sort of a set process for evaluating how well it's meeting your needs now and tweaking it as needed, then a lot of time can go by, and it isn't until somebody views something to be super problematic that everybody takes a look at it, and then we reevaluate. And it's not evil, you know what I mean? It's just sort of a natural thing that happens. But if we set our intention ahead of time that we will evaluate on whatever set schedule we agree upon, then that's just part of what we naturally are doing, if that makes sense. So
I have to say that after talking to Dr. Effian, that I think that the equity lens is a set document. It is something that's already done. We don't make up the rules. We don't discuss it. It is a document that you go by. And of course, there's discussion and stuff, but I think, and you know, I can't see that really ever changing a lot for the simple reason that you always want to treat people with the same kind of understanding and equity. And so that's a set rule. That's not something we make up.
It is. It's something that we tailor to our needs and to our community.
Tailor, but it is, as far as I understand from her, she has it.
She's created one for Ridgeville.
Yeah, right.
Which he's picked, and you can pick and choose from other. I mean, if you Google equity lens,
right,
are some that are published across. Like, so she was showing us from Ohio, I think somewhere, an organization she had worked with. But you do tailor it to your organization, and you
right.
can change it as the needs of the community change.
Okay.
So yeah, that's written in the notes too.
Like also to kind of help with the lens to clear up the equity lens, we could use different perspectives, like the functionalist perspective, which in my notes, it kind of examines the consequences of the structure that the society has placed. And that's very common in like everyday life and very prominent now. And we have the conflict perspective, which is looking at basically the power structures and the systems and the coercion of them. So like using, those are for examples, but using those different lenses, we can kind of tune in more to, I guess, navigate what we need to look for to help whoever we need to help. Does that make sense? I'm trying to break it down.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So yeah.
Okay.
Right, Nelly, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, Kyron, that's really useful. And I think hopefully when we meet next and we have Dr. Effian here, we'll go back to that agenda item to look at the equity lens. And I think those are really good points that we should discuss and think about as we're kind of finalizing what our personal tailored Ridgeville Park District equity lens is going to look like. I think those are really good points that you made.
Thank you.
It's a little loud in my background. I'm sorry. Does anyone else want to add anything else to that for now? No, Elaine, I don't know if you have any ideas. I don't think you've added anything so far. Or if anyone else has anything else to add on that.
Well, as I was saying before, I think that this is something that, in addition to having a specific set of principles, criteria, however we may want to structure the equity lens. This is also, in my thinking, something that it should be aspirational, and it's something that we are going to need to evaluate from time to time. Not with respect, and I think that Debbie's point's well taken. Not that the fundamental principles of equality vary over time, but how they manifest, that does. And that's so I do think that it should be revisited, reevaluated from time to time. And if we do it well initially, there won't be radical changes. But I think that the community will have needs. Individuals will have needs. People will come forward with things that they're looking for for Ridgeville to provide that it hasn't. Or blind spots that we've developed, or areas that we really need to address, new needs that have cropped up in the community. So I think that when we put it together, that we need to have that in mind as well. That growth and flexibility aspect to it, which doesn't mean that it's a floating opera. This is this will be something that helps us define, and in a methodical kind of way, to consistently bring to the different kinds of interactions that come within the purview of the equity lens.
It makes me think of like our ordinances for the park district, right? Like sometimes they need to be specified or changed. We deal with that in board meetings all the time. We're talking about that with like our barbecue issue, right? Like our barbecue stance right now. So sometimes those things evolve and just become more specific based on needs.
Right.
Makes me think of the Constitution. It's a living, breathing document that but it provides hopefully, but it provides the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's not embedded in whatever it was that we think Thomas Jefferson thought.
And leading into that, that's actually a really good point. We can look at the symbols that were kind of constructed to produce the inequalities and see how that has evolved around time, and in relation to the United States, to India, to Pakistan, Iraq, Jerusalem, places like that in comparison, and see how they handled the situation, how it turned out. Just learning from them. Not necessarily they're the same scenarios, but maybe we can take from what they did and add a little something that we might find beneficial for us in accordance to what we need for the park.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I particularly like that the idea of taking a global approach, because I feel like Evanston is so unique in the way that it, in a lot of ways, reflects our greater country in a way that other small cities don't. And looking out broader, I think would be really beneficial. Are we good on that for now? I mean, I know we'll discuss this more. We're going to be adding to this and everything. Okay, so then the next agenda item is the Northwestern Equity Grant. I have some things I would like to share on this, but I also have some people I need to remind to be a little quieter back there. I don't know if anyone else has any, ideas or thoughts on this grant. If you do, you are welcome to share them. I'm going to go get that a little quieter out there.
Did JC share the grant, the Northwestern grant, with everybody? Okay, so she found a grant through Northwestern, and she'll be able to talk more specifically about this than I can, but she had shared it with me. Northwestern is offering grant assistance for equity programs. It's an equity grant specifically. So she had forwarded it to me and said, hey, is this something that we should look into? with the park district because we're prioritizing this work right now. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. And then she actually had a really specific idea of what to do with that grant. Should we apply for it? I talked to Brian. With larger grants like this, really with any grant, but especially with larger grants, it has to be board approved. So it's something that we would want to talk about it tonight as a committee, see what we think about it. If it feels like something that, we all agree we should move forward with, the next step would be for JC and I to talk to Brian about it, to kind of catch him up to speed. And then it would be discussed at a board meeting, assuming the Board of Commissioners decides that it's something that we should move forward on, then we could go ahead and apply for this grant. So that's just kind of like the ins and outs of how this kind of stuff goes. So JC, go ahead and tell them about the grant and your ideas for it, and we'll just kind of start discussing.
Okay, so here's my idea. I've actually had, this has been an idea for a long time. And once I saw the grant money come through and everything, it just seemed to kind of link together. I will say, in terms of deadlines and such, it would be really tight. The letter of interest needs to be in by midnight the day of the next board meeting. So it'd be, I would have everything ready and then the board would have to approve, and then I would have to turn it in after the board meeting. But so the idea that I have is I have an executive functioning curriculum that I've written that I call Brain Effects. It runs out of Ridgeville. It's running with the District 65 in the afternoons right now. And so my idea is, through a combination of parent workshops, professional development for teachers, and model lessons in the classroom, that we could implement the Brain Effects curriculum in the last 2 years of preschool and the first 2 years of elementary to help bridge the early childhood education into elementary education while supporting that with executive functioning learning.
JC, will you talk a little bit about executive function?
Yes. Okay. So executive functioning is, bring my brain model down here. Does this help? So these are the frontal lobes. This part of the brain essentially coordinates what happens in the rest of the brain. In terms of learning, you can be a really intelligent person, but if your executive functioning skills don't work well, you don't have the ability to show what your capabilities are, right? Like if you go home and you write a fantastic paper, but you forget to go turn it in, you're not getting a good grade. It's late, you're going to get marked off. A lot of this planning, organization, memorization techniques, a lot of the things that people who are really successful, a lot of these skills that they have all happen in this part of the brain. But because of how education is taught, we oftentimes are not teaching these skills, right? Like a lot of kids don't know how to study for tests. They don't know how to fill out a planner and plan ahead, or how to get a long-term project done. And so Brain Effects fills in those gaps. And because I'm me, and because the brain works, much better and remembers things when it's happier and is working well. The Brain Effects curriculum is also very play-based, especially in the early childhood part. And so kids are generally really engaged. We actually, in the last 2 weeks of the District 65 in the afternoons, we've been playing these memory games, and we're having so much fun that, the 45 minutes is just blowing by. And so now the kids are learning all these different memorization techniques, such as chunking, how you chunk information together to remember it more easily, how to come up with personal connections so things, will stay in your memory longer. And from the experience that I have, not only as a teacher, but I also have specifically taught a different executive functioning curriculum, both teachers and students are really impressed by how capable they are after they learn these skills, and how when teachers change the way they approach children and change how they have their environment to promote executive functioning skills, how well their students do. So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Have you?
Or you discuss a little bit more? Yes.
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I was. Okay, thank you. Sorry. I was
That's
going to
all right.
ask, have you incorporated any social emotional aspects along with that to aid in the approach? Also to just kind of configure a more sound structural foundation for emotional stability later on, reduce trauma, increase memory capacity, you know, all the positive things that don't come when you have the negative trauma infested or whatever. So how can we use our park district to emphasize and incorporate what you use and also attach that social emotional aspect, so we're targeting not only the brain, like intelligence or memory, but we're attacking the emotional aspect as well, which is very, very crucial, which they do not teach you in school.
They don't. And so that's part of, we talk about that in brain effects also, because a brain that is a worried brain, a brain that isn't fed well, a brain, we actually just had this conversation today. Like one of the kids in class said, you know, kids' brains work better than adult brains. And I was like, right? If that brain is safe, if that brain is well rested, if that brain is well fed, if that brain has a warm, safe place to sleep at night, then that child's brain will work better than most adults, right? But you have to have all those things in place. And I think that that's something really important for people to know, regardless of what your background is, because if you have all those things, you're a voter, right? So like, if you know that you having those is an advantage, then it's going to raise your awareness that someone else not having them is going to be a disadvantage. And that hopefully will frame the way that you move forward and what choices you make in your own personal life, but also in how you vote, right? It also, on the other side, if you are coming from a place where you'll eventually figure out, I didn't sleep well, I didn't feel safe, I now know that impacted my brain, and I now know that I have power to fix it, because that's what we also talk about in brain effects. The brain is incredibly plastic, more plastic than we ever knew before. I get to share all sorts of stories of like what we were taught when we were kids, that, you know, intelligence is fixed, it's not fixed. The brain will keep growing as long as you keep teaching it. The worst thing that you can do as a human being is get really comfortable in your life, right? And do the same thing every day with the same people. And then all those neurons are like, you don't need me anymore. And they just all start dying off in your old age. And I think those pieces are really important. So I want to go back to the social emotional piece too. Having kids understand how their emotions impact their brain is really important. So in those first 2 years of the program that would be in the preschool part, it's also, a lot of it is self-regulation, learning how to manage your emotions when your emotions are, you know, you're super excited, when you're not so excited, when you're angry, and what that feels like and what you can do about it. Because if you can't control what emotional state your brain is, then you can't control what your brain is going to do. And if you don't know how to make yourself a good classmate, then you're going to impact somebody else's learning in a way that may not be great. So that's it's the community too. It's when you're a part of a group, you don't shout out, because you're going to interrupt someone else's learning. And it becomes not only great for the brain, but great for community building, because then you're all kind of growing your brains together.
I just forwarded the committee the email from JC about the grant, so you can actually see what this grant is from Northwestern. JC, I clicked on it just because I was curious. It's so the grant is seeking applications for racial equity and community partnership grants. Is there, with the letter of interest that you plan to write, how will you focus on the racial equity aspect of the executive function program you're talking about?
I think both from the end of, you know, like what I just said, when everybody's brain is working better, everybody can work better together, right? And I think specifically in District 65, there's a lot of kids that are not getting what they need. And race right now is it's not just the Black and brown kids that aren't getting what they need, right? So if we want to get everybody together and get everyone feeling that the kids are getting what they need and we can move forward together in a direction, then we all need to feel like we're getting what we need. And that's not happening. I don't really know that there is any community in Evanston that's feeling like, yes, Aiden.
I'm just, for notes, you're planning on this being an after-school program at Ridgeville or going into the school?
Going into the schools
Gotcha.
during the school day.
Okay.
Is there staff that's needed for that, JC, besides yourself?
My idea is that this first, because part of what Northwestern is looking for is for like something that's going to grow moving forward, right? So my idea is that we would do a pilot program.
So would you pick specific schools that like within Ridgeville? Like, would you pick Oakton and Dawes as like a pilot program, or would you want to target more of like the?
I was thinking of working with Oakton and Dawes since they're within Ridgeville.
Wondering if like your hoity-toity Orrington Willards would be involved as well, or if it's just.
I mean, the idea is eventually, I personally believe this is going to be so fantastic that all the schools are going to want it, right? But for this particular purpose, I think Dawes and Oakton is where I would put this. And then Natalie, the other piece too is that from an equity point of view, I really strongly believe, and this is part of the reason why I want to partner with Northwestern, because I would love for them to study this. I believe that some of these kids who are having a hard time meeting expectations at grade level, I think that getting this piece will help get them there.
Okay. And it's so what would, because I'm sure you'll have to write this in your letter of interest, what would the funding fund? What would the funds fund for the program?
It would fund a person doing the professional development. We got to get parents in there too. So having, parent opportunity to engage also for the model lessons in the classroom. And then developing the curriculum, because I already have the lessons and all that are all written, but essentially putting it in a format where the teachers can take it into the classroom.
So it would cover staff time and development, right? And then it would also cover basically like supplies, that kind of stuff that's needed too.
Exactly.
Okay, so from a teacher perspective.
Yes.
So I'm hearing two things. You are going to come in and do the curriculum that you're going to adapt from what you've already created. But then you are hoping, like the intent is that the teachers will then follow through, or?
So the idea is the way that it's been implemented in the past is, so there'd be a professional development, you'd learn a chunk of lessons, I come in and model the chunk of lessons, and then
you're doing this for the teachers, essentially.
Exactly.
You're gonna do, like, go in on one of our, I mean, granted, we're not doing those anymore, but like the half day, and you're gonna do a professional development, show teachers what the program is, and then you're gonna then work with teachers who feel like they need that added support of like watching you model a lesson to go in and have that happen during the school day. So like essentially it's you teaching the teachers how to implement this program.
Yes. And then the idea is that then the Brain Effects curriculum would then be embedded in the curriculum. Right? Because then it overlays with.
I'm just concerned that the district has an SEL curriculum. We don't have a executive functioning curriculum, but it wouldn't be necessarily, I guess the principals can pick. I'm just thinking of how we would get them to buy into it. And
so it was on Gorin. Remember Gorin way back when had the 5-year plan?
Yeah.
Executive functioning was on there and it never got attended to.
Really?
Yeah. Oh. I actually called and offered Debbie, I see you. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I called and I was like, I can help you with this. And I never got a response. I tried, I knew a couple people who knew him. Like I tried to wiggle myself in and I wasn't able to. It's on there.
Yeah.
Debbie, what would you like to say?
I can tell you that I did a workshop on this at New Trier. I didn't do it. I attended a workshop on this.
Do you remember who ran the workshop? Because I'm guessing I know who it is.
I could look it up, but
Rush Neural Behavioral Center?
What?
Rush Neural Behavioral Center?
Yeah, it was the neurobehaviorals, yes.
And I did that worked for them.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. My concern here is that I don't see this as an REDI committee discussion really right now, number one. And number two, you're talking about taking it into the school and you doing it for the teachers. I don't see where Ridgeville, I mean, I'd like to see it used in Ridgeville programs, but I don't really see how we could get a grant for someone. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a little convoluted, the grant bit to me right now.
Well, I wanted to speak on that too, JC. Can I say something, or do you want to respond to Debbie first?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, it's definitely at a minimum confusing to me, and possibly, you know, worse than that, sort of a stumbling block. The idea that this would go into the districts at such an integrated into what they're doing level, as opposed to it being extracurricular, like your Brain Effects is through Ridgeville, or like our after school program is at Cayman, which is more of a hybrid. You know what I mean? It definitely targets a specific school. And we, you know, have connections there so that we can get those kids into the program. And yet it's not at the school, right? Did we change it? Is it at the school or it's at Cayman? I mean, this is of course pre-pandemic.
The after school program?
Yeah.
It's still at Cayman. I mean,
Okay.
It's not anything right now, but
because I'm just thinking that there's all kinds of like liability and logistics and like, you know, is just issues that would become, you know, possible deal breakers when we go into schools or when we try to do things during the school day. It just seems like complicated. And I would love to see us offer what you're talking about to District 65 schools, especially the ones in Ridgeville, if not, you know, all District 65, but possibly in a way that was done, you know, digitally is always an option, especially if we're still in the pandemic. As to where, I don't know what your timeline is here, how much more like development you have to do for that kind of curriculum, or if it's all ready to go, or somewhere in between. But I just think that being in the schools, I'm wondering how how necessary that component is, and also if you have any existing connections, JC, to make you think that this would be something. Because like, let's say we get the grant, you know, wouldn't it be contingent, or would it need to be contingent on the district already buying into the idea and that kind of thing?
And the fact that they are aligned across the district per grade level, so they are very regimented, unfortunately, to the point where when Arlie was in kindergarten, my sister at Dawes, my sister who teaches at Lincoln, could talk to her on a daily basis and say, "Oh, did you read this story today?" Because they all follow the same curriculum across the district. So going in and having something specialized, which they do also, but they don't have very much wiggle room for choosing their own things, is what
I don't see this as a district issue at all. I'd love to see you, JC, personally go after this grant.
Well, and Debbie,
I don't see it as a, I don't understand. I mean,
well, okay. So one thing I wanted to say
schools.
before is that if you go to the link that Natalie sent, I haven't looked at this in its entirety, but I was trying to like see some key points while also listening to everything everyone's been talking about. And there's a section there, if you click it, that's in the middle of the page that says have a project idea. The university is aiming to fund proposals for structural changes that address racial equity. Ideas should focus on one or more of the following areas. And real simply, it just says health equity, economic and social empowerment, and children and youth learning. So, I mean, if JC's idea is focused on children and youth learning, you know, and incorporating brain effects stuff, incorporating executive functioning skills, that in and of itself seems like it might very well meet what Northwestern is looking for. Even even given that this does have a racial focus, you know, the proving of the racial component to Northwestern or to anyone else, that is kind of burdensome, and I don't know exactly how you want to deal with that piece. And if you like, for instance, you know, some initial research could be done to see if there are any studies that show that there is a racial disparity in the realm of executive functioning specifically, and how a curriculum designed to address that. I see you, Kyron, nodding, so I don't know if you have some info on that specifically.
Oh, I have a lot. Yes, I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say. Oh, okay.
So yeah, no, all I was trying to say, and then
Oh.
I'll turn it over to you or whoever, is just that if we look at what Northwestern is looking for, I think the connections can definitely be made with racial equity, REDI committee, Northwestern's grant, District 65 schools. I think it's all, the components are all there. I'm just kind of like looking.
What are we doing at Ridgeville with it? We were getting a grant for someone to go into the school district and do stuff?
Well, it's Ridgeville staff, right? So it would be a Ridgeville program.
But it wouldn't be at Ridgeville.
We're sending our staff into the schools to essentially do this training with teachers.
Yeah, I don't, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. It's great training. It's great. And I could see where JC would be phenomenal at it. But I just question, you know, are we biting off more than we need to? I mean, go into the schools and...
We're biting off just enough. It's not just, it's a lifestyle. It's not just training, it's a lifestyle. And I've worked in different schools in the Evanston community. So just to make it stick, you're worrying about if something will stick. Well, this is something that we can make stick, because if we target the social emotional aspect that has everything to do with functioning, processing, success, and just what you need in the world to be successful, to be a normal human being. We see that all across Chicago, all across Evanston. I've done research personally within the last 3 years about the disparities and the lack of resources, and how living in trauma-related areas resulted in lower educational performance, and those tended to be Brown, Latino kids, boys and girls versus their white counterparts in every subject that we looked at statistically. These are tested. Also, going to the grant, when you want to think about grants and getting money, they want results. They want to see results. So how can we make sure that they are firm in knowing that we're going to give them those results because they're giving us this large amount of money? So we've got all these research people on the staff, myself, who have researched, other psychologists, researchers who have researched. This has everything to do with race, equity, inclusion, and diversity. Our world is that. You can't ignore it. It is a function in itself. And to ignore that is kind of the problem where we've had all these years. And that's why we're at this stage we are still today, because we didn't have grants wanting to focus on the emotional aspect, but rather math and science. And now we're seeing, oh, well, we can't really have the math and science people working if we're having depression, or people aren't getting the equal or the right amount of education or fair education. It's all a loop. It's all a cycle. It's all connected.
I totally agree with you 100%. My question is, as a park district, is this really what we take on? I mean, we obviously want kids to do well, but we're not with, it's not a school, you know, but
we love kids.
I hear you, Debbie. The only thing I would say to that is that so much of my programming is in accordance with District 65. I mean, we offer after school programs, we offer enrichment programs. Our entire calendar is based on our partnerships with District 65. So, you know, the work that JC has done in the after school programs, we tried doing it at Oakton. It worked better doing it at Ridgeville, but we even go to Oakton to pick up those kids, and we walk them personally to Ridgeville to take part in her program. So we're already, I mean, we are in it to win
No,
it.
I understand that, but are we talking about training teachers to do this
Yes.
Yeah.
See,
in
that's
the school district,
That's
in
just
the schools?
my concern is,
Not our,
like, I think it's an awesome idea. I just feel like before you can apply for it even, or before you can, I mean, I guess if you go to the district and say, or go to those principals and say, hey, like, I know Marlene Aponte, she's going to be on it. She will be 100% make it work, the principal at Dawes. If you go there and say, but like I have this money, will you allow me to take a day or two? Because that's the problem is I know that the district sets up the professional development for the teachers. So it would have to be a way to get the district, the superintendent, whoever, Stacy Beardsley, to give the permission for those schools to break away from the rest of the district in order to get the training for this program. So there's, like, I get that we are connected with District 65 and that we do programming, but so is there a way to make it an after school program or some sort of,
Well, Aiden's totally right. Like, so for example, the after school program, we were able to make that happen because there was a need from it that came directly from District 65. Well, gosh, Mr. Mack, is that his name?
Uh-huh.
He came to us directly, to Lawrence Hemingway, and then Lawrence approached us, and the three of us, so D65, the city of Evanston, and Ridgeville sat down and said, okay, how do we make this thing happen? There's a need for it. So I think Aiden is 100% right. You do need to have that collaboration support from the schools, even going into this application process. Having letters of support from those principals is going to be, I think, key in like really, showing Northwestern that this is a program that's needed and that you have support on all sides of the aisle in terms of making it, of actually executing it.
And I think that is key. And I think that's a question for JC is, do you have some of that existing like support from the district teachers or principals or whatever yet? Or is that a step you would still have to achieve? And do you see yourself doing that before applying for the grants or after? Because it seems like Northwestern might want to know that you have all your ducks in a row before they'll award the money, because otherwise it's just an idea that the district may or may not go for.
right. And I think a great maybe idea, changing it to, I don't know, this is just my brain of having heard so many people and their concerns for the preschool options in Evanston are mostly half day.
And expensive.
I mean, so yes, expensive, but just half day. And so they are not equitable because people who work, we can't do that. We have to, and very few, I mean, Robert Crown offers full day options, but not very many of them, especially now that COVID. But so to maybe offer it as an opportunity, like an extended day, extended learning. I know it's probably not, I don't know how your curriculum is fleshed out, but like to do like a little preschool program. So if they go to JEH in the morning, then they could be picked up or dropped off at Ridgeville and then get this extended programming.
Well, what is the age range, JC, that the curriculum is designed for
The last
currently?
2 years of preschool and the first 2 years, like first and kindergarten and first grade, right?
Correct. Right. So like,
we used it at New Trier with special needs kids. That was
Cool.
a high school.
High school. Yeah, high school. Well, I think that to go back a little bit to establish, the need for this, as Natalie was talking about, was the case with the after school program. It sounds like if Dr. Gorin, had it in the 5-year plan that the executive functioning would be a focus and it didn't take place. I mean, that right there, I think definitely establishes that, it was considered at one point to be a goal. It wasn't achieved. And I don't mean to highlight like, oh, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. I just mean that if you have curriculum ready to go, that not only meets a need that many people would agree, is there, but that already in the past was established as a goal and it wasn't met. I mean, to me, that feels like it's just putting a plug into a socket. Like there is a need for it, and you're offering to fill that need. To me, it's just still the question of, you know, teaching the teachers and then presuming that, I mean, teachers struggle to fit all of their necessary stuff into their school day as it is, and forget about, you know, what's going on right now with the pandemic. It's just kind of a nightmare, and it's about to change again, and teachers are going to have to teach some kids in person and some kids remotely, you know. So again, that's another question I have that I don't mean to ask you and then not give you a chance to answer, but I'm wondering about the timing. You know, are we thinking that this would be implemented at some point during this school year or not until the next?
When we receive grant money that's unplanned for, we can't use it until the following fiscal year because it has to be budgeted for.
Okay,
So
right.
If we were awarded money, we can receive it right now, but we can't spend it until after July 1st.
Okay.
And I think if I remember, I sent Natalie all the dates. They're not making a decision till March. And then
the deadline is what again for applying?
The letter of interest, which is not the full application for the grant, is due on February 11th, which is also the next board meeting.
Okay, so you can kind of get your foot in the door with that letter of interest, and then you submit more to flesh it out in a full application.
They'll invite you. So you do your letter of interest, and if they like your idea, they'll invite you to do the rest of the grant.
So I suggested to JC earlier today that we have this conversation. If the committee felt like it was something that we should move forward on, to go ahead and prepare that letter of interest. And then if we felt like it was something to move forward on, we would talk to Brian just to give him a heads up, but she can go ahead and send that letter of interest in. And she doesn't have to wait until, 11:59 the night of the board meeting so that the board approves. And then she'll find out whether or not she's invited to apply for the grant. And then we can have further conversation or have conversation in February. So if she is invited, then we can move forward with putting the grant together. Do you all feel like that's fair?
Is it a stronger application if it has board approval behind it? Or expression of interest?
For the letter of interest?
Yes.
That's a good question.
It can't be applied for if it doesn't have board approval.
Well, but Natalie, did you just say she can do the letter of interest without board approval because
she
that's
can do
not
the letter of interest without board approval? Right. Because she still has to find out if they're going to invite her to apply, right? So it's like just writing a letter about the program, and if they feel like it's something that makes sense for this grant, then they'll say, please apply. And at that point, we will have had a board meeting and discussed it because we'll put it on the agenda under the REDI agenda item. The board can talk about it, and then that way she's prepared. So if the board says, yay, go for it, and she gets a green light from Northwestern, then we're off to the races. If the board says, I don't think so, or not right now, then no harm, no foul, right?
Right. And I think that Elaine made a good point. Expressing a formal support from a body of people that are relating to the organization this is coming from is probably a good idea. Why not, right? But because of the timing and because of everything you just said, Natalie, I don't think that we necessarily need board approval at the stage of the letter of interest or whatever that's called. But what we could do is establish a majority of this committee being in support of moving forward with the letter of interest and then subsequent steps as they make sense. So, I mean, I would suggest that unless anyone has any other questions on this, or, if any other discussion needs to happen, that we might want to take a vote right now on whether we support JC submitting that letter of interest, so that the REDI committee formally has taken a stance of support. And then, Kyron, I just wanted to say, I think there's some sort of a delay. I don't know if other people are seeing this, but like if you're trying to chime in, there might be some sort of like a tech issue. So I hope we haven't missed you wanting to weigh in.
It's my
What's that?
What?
It's my,
Not.
it's my laptop. I gotta get a new.
Mine kicked me off the whole meeting earlier, so.
I saw that you left and came back.
Yeah.
Because I was on my phone first and then it overheated, so I had to go to my laptop. So.
Oh, technically. Martha, I think that's a great idea, because if we And that's just the committee establishing support or not for the letter of interest. And I think that's a really good idea.
The other thing, and JC, I don't know if you want to sort of like leave this much variability in it. It's your idea. So it's sort of like, if you feel strongly it should go a certain way as opposed to a different way, I totally get that. But if you want to brainstorm on like, you know, basically two different versions of this, one would be in the schools if we can move forward that way, if all the relevant, you know, people and pieces go into place. But the backup maybe, or a different alternative could be that the programming is actually at Ridgeville instead of in the schools, because it seems like that's one of the issues that people are having today, you know. So, and sorry, Elaine, you started talking at the same time.
I tell you what.
What I was going to say is that I would really be interested in hearing more about Kyron's take on this. I think you've done quite a bit of research. You have a tremendous wealth of expertise. I'd be really interested in hearing more about that at some point.
Okay, yeah, sure. I can, I guess, I don't know, sometime read or present the paper or research that I've done, and we can take ideas from that. And also, I can add in, if any of you have heard of a program here called Right at School. It's an enrichment before and after school program. I'm also an educator with them. The parents and the teachers, they love it. It's great because we also, not only, it's like aftercare, we're looking after kids, but we're also helping them with their homework. We're mentoring them. We're being the extra figure in their life, another positive figure. And Right at School each year has just progressively grown and has ranked high, one of the top in the country. I don't want to put a number because I can't really remember, but we're highly ranked in the country. So implementing a program like this that doesn't necessarily or isn't necessarily taught in the schools and is recognized pretty much, I would feel, as a problem. I'd say we have a good shot, honestly.
I do. I also, Debbie, when I first talked to Natalie about this, I told her, I was like, I don't know if Ridgeville is the right place for this to live. I approached Ridgeville first because that's where my Brain Effects has always lived. And I told her, I was like,
I don't have a problem with you approaching Ridgeville. I really don't see this as a REDI committee issue. That's my opinion. So if we were going to vote, I would abstain because I don't see this as a REDI committee issue. I think if you want to bring it to the board, that's great, you know, but I just, you know, we're going way over time. I just don't see how this is, but that's my own, you know, if you get the grant and then there are issues about somebody's complaining about blah, then that issue is brought to the REDI committee and we discuss it. But I don't see this as a REDI committee issue, more of a board.
It's Northwestern, though, that has established that the grant they're offering has to do with racial equity.
I know, but I'm saying that it still has to be approved by the board first, you know.
What do you mean first?
Go ahead. You know, I'm just saying that's my feeling. So, but I hear what everybody's saying. It is a phenomenal program. I've done the workshop, you know, but I think we get off base a lot here in this meeting, but go ahead. Yeah, obviously I'm the only one.
Can't deny research. Can't deny the fact.
Oh, Kyron, we lost you.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I was just saying,
I'm not denying the fact that, you know, kids need this, but I don't see it as a REDI committee issue yet, I guess is what I'm saying.
Let him talk.
And relative perspectives. It is what it is, but as a whole, as society, as what we see stemming from society and smaller communities, I would say, and most of the communities here would say it's a problem.
I can't understand you. I'm sure it's my computer. There is a back.
I think it's just tech issues.
It's a what?
I think it's just technical issues.
Oh.
There's a delay, Kyron. Debbie, I'll say I told her to put this on the agenda, so I take credit for that. It's a racial equity grant, and so I felt like it was appropriate to talk with our committee about that. So that's why it's here.
I also just want to say that I think that when we have like an issue that's brought to the district and then that finds its way to us as a committee as a way to sort of fix a problem, you know, address an issue that has come from the community. That's sort of like directionally from the community to us. But I view our work here to be in the other direction as well. We're not just sitting around waiting for people to tell us that we've messed up and then we like work on it. It's also like, what can we do to offer more to the community that is, you know, manifesting equity work, that is getting out there and offering things to the community that affect, you know, communities of color in Ridgeville disproportionately in a positive way, maybe, you know what I mean, or just meeting the needs of children in our community. The children of color, you know, will benefit from that. So that's,
Well,
that's
I see that. Yeah. So the board could very well say, absolutely, go for it. And then it doesn't even have to, you know, but I
well, and
understand.
Debbie, the board has to. I mean, Natalie established that the board would have to.
Yeah, I
approve
don't really want to get into this discussion because I don't agree with all the positive points. It's just that I personally think that we should deal with this at a board meeting. We don't need to take up our 1 hour equity meeting with all this discussion. Unless it becomes something.
would you
the board
allow
said-
a
If the board
conversation
says,
to
no,
be
we
had
don't want to
between you
do
and I?
it. And then you say, well, wait a minute, this is an equity issue. And then we say, okay, let's take this to the committee. Fine. But you know, the board could very well say, go for it. Let's do it. Let's support it. And then no problem.
I mean, I agree with that we should probably just call the vote and move on to either, you know, ending the meeting, or if we're going to try to cover something else. So I don't know if you.
Does
if
there
you
need
want-
to be a motion, Martha? Or can we just do a roll call
Was this
vote?
for action? Was this discussion for action?
Well, I had suggested a few minutes ago that we could, as a committee, choose to vote to support moving forward with a letter of, or I'm sorry, what is it called? Letter of interest?
Letter of interest.
Based on Elaine's suggestion that, you know, the board would approve it as a way to bolster the application itself. If we don't have that, either because of timing or because we view it to make more sense to wait for the board to approve it until we get invited to apply. And it sounds like that's what you were saying, Natalie, that we could go ahead with the letter of interest, see if they invite us, then bring it to the board, get the approval, make the formal application at that point in time.
Well,
But right,
we'll put this on the agenda, the board agenda for February, regardless.
right.
So this is just, does she have our support as a REDI committee to write that letter of interest?
Oh, to write the letter, sure. But I don't think we need to take a vote. I think we need to agree or disagree, you know?
Right. Well, this is the kind of thing that, like, formally, it's nice for the minutes that we actually have.
But it wasn't for
vote.
action. If it's for action, you need to take a vote.
Can I ask you a question? Even if if you feel like it's not for this committee, if it helps the community and we've been given a grant and it's gonna, you know, if we can do something about it, why are you against that and that perspective?
Because I sit on the board, and as a board member, I would say go for it. But I just think that as an equity committee, it's like, you know, my
I'm asking
point about
you personally. I'm asking you personally.
that's
Not
what I'm
anybody
saying.
else. Why are you not saying, like, if we were to take this to action, why do you not want to have any more of this conversation? Like, why do you not see this as a racial issue is basically what I'm trying to say.
I don't think it has to be a racial issue off the bat. I think if the board says, let's
That's
do
what
it,
we're saying.
then we
It's
do
been
it.
brought to us as a racial issue. The grant
I'm
is
sorry,
a racial
what?
issue. Come to us. The grant is a racial grant, like to help with
Right.
equity. Like we are committed for equity, for inclusion. Okay, those words, inclusion, people are falling behind. All right, so why not go for it?
It's
Why do you not want
Yes,
to have
I
discussions right now?
said, write the letter, but I don't think we have to take a vote. If we take a vote, take a vote.
Yeah, I was never saying that we have to vote. I was saying that a vote would be a formal step we could take to show hopefully a majority of approval supporting JC, so that if she wants to include that in her letter, that the REDI committee of the Ridgeville Park District voted to support applying for this grant. You know, it sounds good. I mean, and it is a formal body that, you know, can take a stance on this and support it moving forward. So that's why I was suggesting that we vote. I mean, if JC, how do you feel? I mean, would you like us to vote in support of that next step? Or, I mean, you're going to go ahead with it regardless. So I'm not saying you need our vote. You know what I mean?
If that's something you all are, you know, comfortable doing, I agree with you. I would love to be able to put in the letter of interest that I do have support from somebody somewhere at Ridgeville to do this. I mean, at some point, if I write the letter of interest, you guys, you know, there has to be an agreement to work with Ridgeville because I can't apply for the grant on my own.
Yeah, I think it makes sense if you're applying for a racial equity grant and you could potentially have the support of the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Committee of Ridgeville Park District.
I would like to
that
have.
Would be nice to have that in your letter. So
Yeah.
can we just do that for her? Can we just do a roll call vote for support?
I agree with that, and I'd also add that I'd like to see maybe a subcommittee take some further look at the possible ways of achieving this. I think there are a lot of ideas that have floated out, and I think that Kyron has a wealth of insight that we could really benefit from. So I'd like to know a lot more about it. And
I will definitely be connecting JC and Kyron after this meeting.
Yes.
Yes, I was going to ask.
Definitely be happening.
So I'm gonna do the roll call for a vote.
Do it, Aiden.
Okay.
And what is this vote for? I mean,
So
you
we
know-
are voting on whether we support JC's writing of the letter to submit to
interest.
Northwestern for the grant.
okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna just go through the row that I was gonna go through. Natalie,
Yes, Natalie Salee. Yes.
sorry, I have to do both names. Elaine Siegel, right?
Elaine Siegel, yes.
And is it S-I-E-G? How do you?
Siegel, and I don't know why it's not. It doesn't appear on my Zoom. I don't know why.
Okay.
But yeah, it's Siegel.
You
Okay.
can change your name, Elaine, if you click the three dots.
I just did it for her.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Thank you.
I have all.
The host. All right, JC.
Do I vote on my own item?
Yeah.
The thing, yeah. I vote yes.
Okay, Martha Gaines.
Yes.
All right, Debbie Braun.
Yes.
And Iden Nolan. Yes. All right, so JC, you have our blessing and our support to write your letter of interest.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really, I think this curriculum has I mean, Debbie, you've seen it. My curriculum, I wrote part of Rush's curriculum. My curriculum is a little bit different. I individualized more and I started with more of a social emotional base than what we were doing when I was I don't know what Rush is doing now.
This
But
was a while ago, though. I would think it would be before you, but that's a discussion for another time.
yes, we can discuss. So yeah, thank you. And I will do my best. I'll see how far I can get us.
Cool.
We go back to citizen comments at this point. Is that correct?
We have 2 citizen comments in this meeting?
Is it on the
that right?
agenda that way?
What?
No, I was just going off of the board meetings. There's usually one at the end.
Oh,
too.
no, that was something that the board put in.
Okay.
Remember, Natalie? It's not necessary.
That must have been before my board days. Does anybody else have anything they want to say before we move to adjourn? I know we kept everyone long today.
Thank you, Kyron, for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I look forward to talking to you more.
Gratitude.
I look forward to hearing you better.
That was-
Hey, I'm working on it.
What is our next meeting date?
We meet the first and third Thursday. So our next meeting is February 4th at 6 p.m.
Okay, great. And if the City of Evanston continues to offer the programming that they're offering right now, Sarah's at a program at the Noise Cultural Arts Center, and it goes until 6. And if they keep offering it, we're going to keep doing it. Tim isn't always going to be able to go pick her up. So would people be able to do 6:15 instead?
I would.
Yeah, or even 6:30 if that works better for you.
Um,
I don't know if that's too late for anyone else.
6:30.
is fine for me.
6:30 is better for me, but I can make 6:15 work. So
Yeah, works better for me as well, because Patrick
6:30.
clients, and so he
6:30 is better, Aiden?
30.
Okay. Can everybody raise their hand if 6:30 is okay moving forward? Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So that'll just need to be, amended for the public notice and all that.
Will
So
that be forever moving forward?
I would like until further notice. I mean, especially if it works better for some.
That's
of the-
fine. Noted.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your night.
Adjourn officially.
Oh, yes, we
Oh,
should.
we should adjourn.
Oh, I'll make a motion to
7:33.
adjourn the meeting.
I second. All in favor?
You can't do that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do have to roll call adjournment. Yeah.
It's because of COVID. It's not.
Okay, Natalie Sully,
Yes.
Martha Gaines,
Yes.
J.C. Herman,
Yes.
Elaine Siegel,
Yes.
Debbie Braun.
Yes.
Yes, as well. All right, do I have to
All
write?
right.
Go call yourself too.
I don't know.
Well, she's a voting member, so
I'm learning this, friends.
She probably does have to roll call
I
herself.
didn't include your roll call vote for all the things we voted for today.
She did on the other one, I think.
Okay.
yes, she did.
Thanks, guys. See
Okay.
you
Good
soon.
night.
Right.
Bye.
See everyone. Thanks, Karen, for coming.